Montana Territory, December 1892. The kind of winter that turns a man's breath to ice before it leaves his lungs. Caleb Stone sat by the fire in his cabin, watching his grandson pack for California. Not his grandson by blood, by something stronger. The boy's name was Samuel Hartwell, 35 years old now, with a wife and 3 children, waiting by the wagon outside. The youngest child, 4 years old, had wandered inside to escape the cold. The boy stared at Caleb with wide eyes. "Grandpa Caleb, why don't you have a wife like other grandpas?" Samuel spun around, embarrassment coloring his face. "Hush now, that's rude." Caleb smiled, the first real smile in weeks. "It's all right, son." He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "I'm gonna tell you about a rattlesnake, a prayer, and the woman who taught me that some loves don't need a wedding." The child climbed into the chair. Samuel stopped packing. Even his wife Mary moved closer to the doorway to listen. Outside, the wind pushed snow against the windows. Inside, the fire crackled, and Caleb Stone began to speak. "Your grandmother didn't scream when she found Father Thomas face down in Willow Creek with his skull caved in." His voice was steady, the voice of a man who had seen too much death to fear it anymore. "She only screamed when she saw me ride out of those mountains the next morning, because she thought I was the ghost of every man who'd ever failed her." Samuel's face went still. "Wait, Grandma." "Grace, the nun who raised me," Caleb nodded once. "Sit down, son. This'll take about 90 minutes, and you need to hear it before you leave for California." The old man's eyes grew distant. The firelight caught the scars on his weathered face, a knife slash across his left cheekbone, bare claw marks on his right hand, the map of a violent life. Then his eyes closed, and when they opened again, they were young. Wyoming Territory, May 1867. She did not scream when she found the father. Sister Grace Hartwell stood in the shallows of Willow Creek, her black habit soaking up water to the knees, staring at the body of Father Thomas Brennan, face down in the current. The morning sun painted the Bighorn Mountains gold in the distance. The cottonwood trees whispered overhead, and the creek ran red where the father's head had split open against the rocks. 10 children stood on the bank behind her. The youngest was 4. The oldest was 15. They had walked down from St. Catherine's Mission like they did every morning to fetch water. Father Thomas always came first to check the depth. Spring snowmelt made the creek unpredictable, dangerous. This morning, Father Thomas had not been waiting for them. Grace waded deeper. The water pulled at her habit. She reached the body and turned it over. His face was pale, his eyes were open. There was a wound above his left ear. The kind of wound that came from something heavy and deliberate, not from a fall. She checked for a pulse even though she knew. Her father had been an Army surgeon, Major William Hartwell, 5th Pennsylvania Infantry. She had spent her childhood in field hospitals during the war watching him work on broken soldiers. She knew what death looked like. Father Thomas had been dead at least 6 hours. His body was cold. Grace stood in the water and did not scream, did not cry, did not pray. She had learned a long time ago that God listened better to silence than to noise. Behind her, one of the children began to sob, a girl named Louisa, 13 years old. Grace turned and met the girl's eyes. "Run back to the mission. Get Ezekiel. Tell him to bring the wagon." Louisa ran. Grace looked at the oldest boy, Thaddeus, 15 years old, with the hard eyes of someone who had already buried both parents. "Thad, keep the little ones calm. I need to examine the father." Thaddeus nodded. He gathered the younger children like a shepherd gathering sheep. Grace turned back to the body. The wound was clean, too clean. A fall onto rocks would leave jagged edges. This was smooth, rounded, like something had struck him once, hard, from behind. Grace looked at the bank, at the rocks, at the mud. There were boot prints, 2 sets, leading down to the water and back up again. Fresh. From this morning, she memorized the patterns. One set had a deep notch in the right heel. 20 minutes later, Ezekiel arrived with the wagon. Old Zeke was 68 years old with a leg that hadn't worked right since a grizzly bear tried to eat him back in '59. But his arms were still strong. He and Thaddeus pulled Father Thomas from the creek and laid him in the wagon bed. Grace climbed up beside the body. The other children walked behind in silence. They rolled back toward the mission. And Grace Hartwell, 27 years old, daughter of a dead Army surgeon, began to calculate how many days she had left to live. 3 months earlier, Father Thomas Brennan had been a battlefield chaplain during the war. He had served with the Union Army from 62 until 65. He had prayed over dying boys at Shiloh, at Antietam, at Gettysburg. He had seen things no man of God should see. After the war, the church sent him to Wyoming Territory, to the wilderness, to build a mission for orphans, children whose fathers had died wearing blue or gray. It did not matter which. The dead left children behind all the same. Father Thomas built St. Catherine's Mission in 1865, 640 acres with water rights to Willow Creek. Federal land grant under the Homestead Act, legal, documented, protected by law. By 1867, the mission housed 10 orphans, and Father Thomas Brennan had started to receive visitors. The first visitor was a man named Clayton Voss. Voss was 42 years old, tall, handsome, silver threads in his dark hair. He wore expensive suits even in frontier towns. He spoke with a Georgia accent smooth as honey, sharp as a knife. He had been a Confederate cavalry captain during the war. After Lee surrendered, Voss went west like so many others, looking for a second chance, looking for land, looking for money. He found all three. By early 1867, Voss owned 8,000 acres surrounding St. Catherine's Mission. He had purchased the land cheap, from families who did not understand what was coming, from settlers who thought $1.25 per acre was a fortune. Then the railroad surveyors came through in March. The Transcontinental Railroad was pushing west. It would reach Wyoming by the end of the year, and the route the surveyors mapped ran straight through the valley, straight past St. Catherine's Mission. Overnight land that had been worth $1.25 per acre became worth $15, $20, $30 per acre. Clayton Voss owned 8,000 acres, but the most valuable parcel was the one he did not own, the Mission, 640 acres with water rights, right in the center of his holdings. He made Father Thomas an offer, $8,000, a fortune for a religious institution. Father Thomas said no. That was in April. By May, Father Thomas was dead. The funeral, they buried him on the third day. The entire town of Sheridan came, 400 people, more than had ever attended Sunday service. They came in wagons, on horseback, on foot. They filled the small cemetery until there was no room left to stand. Sheriff Donovan stood at the graveside. He was 45 years old with a soft belly and softer hands. He had never been a lawman before Wyoming, before Voss paid him to pin on a badge. Donovan cleared his throat. Accidental drowning. Father slipped on the rocks. The creek was high from snowmelt. A tragedy, but an accident. Grace stood with the 10 orphans. She stared at the sheriff, at the way his eyes would not meet hers, at the way his hands trembled when he spoke. He was lying. Clayton Voss stood across the grave, dressed in black, head bowed, the picture of respectful grief. When the service ended, he approached Grace. "Sister, my deepest condolences." His voice was smooth, concerned. "If there is anything I can do for you and the children, please, do not hesitate to ask." Grace looked at him, at his expensive suit, at his clean hands, at the way he stood like a man who owned everything he could see. "Thank you, Mr. Voss. We will manage." He smiled, sad, understanding. "Of course, but please, remember, if the burden becomes too great, if you find you cannot continue alone, I would be happy to purchase the mission property for a fair price to relieve you of this responsibility." Grace felt something cold settle in her stomach. "The mission is not for sale, Mr. Voss." His smile did not change, but something behind his eyes did, something hard, something hungry. "Of course, sister. I understand. The offer stands, should you change your mind." He walked away. Grace watched him go, and she knew with absolute certainty that Father Thomas had not slipped on any rocks. The first week, a week after the funeral, the bishop sent a letter from Denver. Grace read it alone in the chapel. The paper shook in her hands. "Sister Grace, I have received your report regarding Father Thomas's death. This is a tragedy. However, I must inform you that I cannot send a replacement priest to St. Catherine's at this time. The territory is too dangerous, the mission too remote. I strongly suggest you consider closing the institution and returning to Denver with the children. There are other orphanages, safer places." The Lord will understand. Grace folded the letter. She looked at the 10 children sleeping in the dormitory. Constance, 4 years old, parents dead from cholera. Thaddeus, 15, father killed at Shiloh, mother dead in childbirth. Louisa, 13, entire family massacred by Sioux raiders. 10 children, no other home within 300 miles. Grace burned the bishop's letter in the fireplace. The next morning, the harassment began. Month 1, June 1867. The first week of June, someone drove cattle through the mission garden at night. 30 head of longhorns. They trampled the corn, destroyed the potato plants, turned 2 months of work into mud. Grace and the children replanted. The second week, the well water turned foul. Grace sent Thaddeus down with a rope. He came back up pale and shaking. There was a dead coyote at the bottom. They spent 3 days hauling water from the creek. Then Ezekiel and Thaddeus pulled the carcass out and cleaned the well. The third week, someone cut the fence posts. 12 times in 7 days. The mission's 3 cows and 1 horse wandered off. It took 2 days to find them. The fourth week, rocks came through the chapel windows at midnight. Broken glass everywhere. Little Constance cut her hand on a shard. Grace held the girl while she cried. The first sound the child had made in a month. Grace cleaned the wound, bandaged it, tucked Constance back into bed. Then she sat alone in the dark chapel and felt the fear start to take root. Month 2, July 1867. In July, the supply wagon from Sheridan stopped coming. Grace rode into town. The general store owner would not meet her eyes. "I'm sorry, sister, can't deliver to the mission no more." "Why not?" The man looked at his boots. "Just can't." Grace understood. Someone had paid him not to. She bought what supplies she could carry: salt, flour, bacon. The merchant wrapped them quickly, nervously, like he was afraid to be seen helping her. On the ride back, Grace saw Clayton Voss standing outside his land office, watching her. He did not wave, did not speak, just watched. That night, Grace found Father Thomas's diary. She had been looking for spare candles in his old room, the room no one had entered since his death. She pulled a board loose from the floor, and there it was, a leather journal, hidden. Grace sat on his bed and read by candlelight. Most of the entries were ordinary: prayers, reflections, notes about the children, but the last page made her hands shake. August 15th, 1867. Voss came again today, offered $8,000 for the mission land. I refused. He became angry, said, "Father, accidents happen to stubborn men." He knows I have written to the territorial governor about his land fraud. If I die, it is murder, not accident. The evidence is hidden. God forgive me if I am wrong, but I believe Clayton Voss is a killer. The entry was dated 2 days before Father Thomas died. Grace closed the diary. Her heart was pounding. She looked at the date again. August 15. But Father Thomas died in May. She flipped back through the pages, found the discrepancy. Someone had torn out the pages from April and May. Recently, the edges were still clean. Someone had been in this room, had found the diary, had removed the warnings, but missed the last page. Grace sat in the dark and realized 2 things. First, Father Thomas had known he was going to die. Second, she was next. Month 3, August 1867. August was when things became truly dangerous. The supply wagon driver was beaten on the road. 3 men, masks over their faces. They broke his arm, broke his ribs, left him in the dirt. He survived, barely, and he left the territory the next day. No one would deliver to St. Catherine's Mission after that. Grace rationed the food, 1 meal a day, mostly bread and beans. The children grew thin, quiet, haunted. Constance stopped speaking entirely. The 4-year-old girl would just stare at the walls, silent, even when Grace held her. On August 20th, someone nailed the barn door shut from the outside. The mission's cow was trapped inside. It was July, 90 degrees. The animal nearly died from heat before Thaddeus broke the door down. On August 23rd, Grace woke to find boot prints in the mud outside the children's sleeping quarters. Someone had walked around the building, slowly, deliberately, looking through the windows. On August 25th, a voice whispered outside the chapel window at 2 in the morning. "A woman alone cannot hold land in Wyoming. Sell while you still can." Grace sat in the dark with Father Thomas's old pistol in her lap, shaking, waiting for the voice to come back. It did not, but the message was clear. The decision. On the last day of August, Ezekiel found Grace in the chapel. The old man sat down beside her, his bad legs stretched out stiff in front of him. Sister, you got to get help. From who Zeke the sheriff works for Voss. The bishop won't send anyone. The nearest army fort is 100 miles north. Ezekiel pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. There's one man in Wyoming territory who don't fear Clayton Voss. He handed her the paper. On it was written Caleb Stone, 40 miles north, up Bighorn Canyon. Grace looked at the name. Who is he? Mountain man, former Army scout, served with Father Thomas during the war. The father told me once if anything ever happened, find Caleb Stone. He's the only man worth trusting. Grace stared at the paper. A mountain man. Yes, ma'am. 40 miles away. Yes, ma'am. And you think he'll help? Ezekiel met her eyes. I think if he don't, you're dead by Sunday. Grace folded the paper. She had 1 week of food left, 10 children depending on her, and a land baron who wanted her gone. Watch the children, Zeke. I'll be back by tomorrow night. And if you ain't, Grace handed him Father Thomas's pistol. Take the children north to Fort Laramie. Don't stop. Don't look back. She left before dawn. The journey 40 miles through Bighorn Canyon, 6 hours of hard riding. Grace had not ridden a horse in 2 years. Her thighs burned. Her back ached. The Wyoming sun beat down like a hammer. But she kept moving. The trail climbed into pine forest, steep canyon walls on both sides. Grizzly country, cougar country, the kind of wilderness that ate people who made mistakes. Grace carried Father Thomas's Winchester rifle under her cloak. She had learned to shoot when she was 12. Her father taught her before the war, before Gettysburg, before everything fell apart. She had not fired a gun since 1863. The trail narrowed, the canyon walls closed in, and then 3 hours into the journey, Grace saw the smoke, a thin column rising from somewhere ahead. She followed it. Caleb Stone's cabin sat built into the cliff face. Stone foundation, log walls, almost invisible from the trail unless you knew where to look. Grace dismounted, tied her horse to a pine, walked forward. A man stood in front of the cabin, feeding a salt block to a pack mule. He did not look up, but Grace knew he had heard her approach. She studied him. 6 feet tall, broad shoulders, long hair the color of iron streaked with gray, tied back with a leather cord. Full beard. He wore a buckskin jacket with fringe, wool pants, beaver pelt hat. Beside him, leaning against the cabin wall, was a rifle, a Sharps, .52 caliber, Civil War sharpshooter weapon. The man finished giving the mule salt. Then he turned. His face was weathered like old leather. Scars marked his skin, a knife slash across the left cheekbone, bear claw marks on his right hand, but his eyes were clear, sharp. The eyes of a man who missed nothing. Sister. His voice was deep, slow, like he did not use it often. You're a long way from any church. Grace walked straight toward him. No hesitation, no fear. She had ridden 40 miles. She was not going to waste time. Mr. Stone, Father Thomas Brennan told me that if anything happened to him, you were the only man in Wyoming territory worth trusting. The man went very still. He's dead, murdered, and I need your help. Caleb Stone stared at her for a long moment. Then he spoke, and his voice was different, quieter, harder. How did Thomas die? The sheriff says drowning, but I saw the wound. Blunt force trauma to the occipital bone, fractured skull, submerged post-mortem. Caleb's eyebrows rose slightly. You talk like an army surgeon. My father was one, Major William Hartwell, 5th Pennsylvania. He died at Gettysburg. Something changed in Caleb's face. Recognition. I knew William Hartwell, served under him in '62 at Shiloh. He saved my arm after I took shrapnel. Grace felt something loosen in her chest. Then you know I'm not lying. Never thought you were sister. Caleb looked at the mountains, at the squishty, at something Grace could not see. Thomas and I rode together. He was battlefield chaplain. I was scout, Atlanta campaign, '64. He saved my life when I was drowning in whiskey and guilt. Talked me out of killing a Confederate officer I'd sworn to murder. He turned back to her. Thomas wrote me 4 months ago. Said there was trouble with a land speculator named Clayton Voss. Asked if I could come help with spring planting. I put it off. Thought I had time. His jaw tightened. I was wrong. Grace pulled out Father Thomas's diary, the torn pages, the final entry. She handed it to Caleb. He read. His face did not change. But when he finished, he looked at Grace with something cold in his eyes. Voss. Yes. And you've been alone at that mission for 3 months. With 10 orphans, ages 4 to 15. Caleb was silent for 30 seconds. Then he turned, walked into his cabin, came back with a saddle and bridle. I failed Thomas once. Won't fail him twice. He began saddling his horse. Grace felt tears trying to come. She pushed them back. Thank you. Caleb did not look at her. Don't thank me yet, sister. If Voss killed Thomas for that land, he won't stop at one murder. He swung into the saddle. Let's go get your children to safety. They rode. The journey back took 4 hours. Caleb rode in silence. Grace tried to fill it with words. Nervous habit? She told him about the cut fences, the poisoned well, the midnight threats. Caleb nodded, asked questions. Short, precise. How many men did Voss have? Did the sheriff help him? Were there any allies in town? Grace answered as best she could, but she noticed Caleb was not just listening. He was studying the trail, the ground, looking for things she could not see. Twice he stopped his horse, dismounted, examined tracks in the dirt. 3 different horses been watching your mission. 2 different boot patterns, one with a deep notch in the right heel. Professional surveillance. Grace felt cold. How long, Mesa? Weeks, maybe months. They kept riding. When they reached St. Catherine's Mission, the 10 children were waiting. Thaddeus stood on the porch with Father Thomas's pistol. Ready, protective. Grace rode up. Thad, this is Caleb Stone. He was Father Thomas's friend. Thaddeus lowered the gun slowly, studied Caleb with suspicious eyes. The boy had seen too many men who promised help and delivered nothing. Caleb dismounted, looked at Thaddeus. You're doing good work, son, protecting your family. Keep that up. Thaddeus's shoulders relaxed slightly. The other children emerged. 9 pairs of eyes staring at the strange mountain man with the scarred face and the big rifle. Little Constance stood at the back, 4 years old, silent, clutching a rag doll. Caleb's eyes found her, softened, just for a moment. Then he turned to Grace. Show me around. They walked the property. Caleb studied everything, the cut fence posts, the trampled garden, the barn door with crowbar marks, the disturbed dirt around the well. He found cigarette butts behind the barn, expensive tobacco, hand-rolled. He found boot prints near the chapel window, fresh, from last night. And then he stopped at the front porch. A large hay bale sat leaning against the railing, half broken, surrounded by scattered straw. Grace sighed. I've been trying to move that all morning. It's too heavy. Someone braced it with fence posts underneath. Caleb knelt, examined the base, looked at the placement, at the angle. Sister, where do you normally sit in the mornings? Grace pointed. Right there for morning prayers. I watch the sunrise over the mountains. Caleb's face went very still. Step back, slowly. Mr. Stone, what? Just do it. Grace stepped back. Caleb drew his Colt revolver. 1860 Army model, 6 shots. He moved toward the hay bale carefully. Sit on it. What? Trust me, just sit on the bale. I need to check these porch boards underneath. Grace stepped forward, gathered her habit so she would not trip, started to lower herself onto the hay. And that was when she heard it. A dry rattling sound, like beans shaking in a tin can. She froze. From the hay sliding out slow and deliberate came a timber rattlesnake, 4 feet long, thick as a man's forearm. Its tail vibrated. Its head rose. Its tongue flicked the air, and its eyes locked on Grace's ankle. The snake coiled exactly where she had been about to sit. Grace could not move, could not breathe, could not think. Caleb's left arm wrapped around her waist. He pulled her back hard. They both stumbled. She fell against his chest. Her hands grabbed his buckskin jacket. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Caleb steadied her with his left arm, raised his pistol with his right. One shot. The sound cracked across the valley. The snake's head exploded. Its body dropped, twitched once, went still. Grace stared at it, at the exact spot where her legs would have been, where her hands would have reached, where the venom would have entered her bloodstream. Timber rattler that size. Caleb's voice was quiet, grim. You'd be dead in 5 minutes, no antidote. Grace's knees buckled. Caleb held her upright. If I'd sat down, but you didn't. He let go, moved to the dead snake, picked it up carefully, held it up to the light. Sister, look at the tail. Grace forced herself to look. There, pressed deep into the scales. A rope mark, clear as day. Someone tied this snake, carried it here, placed it exactly where you pray every morning. Grace felt her fear transform. It became something else, something colder, harder. Like Father Thomas. Exactly like Father Thomas. Made to look like an accident. Caleb dropped the snake, walked behind the barn, found something, came back holding a small wooden cage. Straw inside. The same straw from the hay bale. He showed Grace the boot print next to the cage. Deep notch in the right heel. The same print from Willow Creek, from the night Father Thomas died. Grace looked at the dead snake, at the cage, at the boot print, and something inside her made a decision. Mr. Stone, what do we do? Caleb reloaded his pistol. We set a trap of our own. From inside the mission, Thaddeus shouted, Mr. Stone's sister, Grace Ryder, coming. They turned. On the ridge to the south, a single horseman sat watching, too far to identify, but close enough to see. Caleb's eyes narrowed. That's a spotter, checking if their trap worked. The rider turned, disappeared over the ridge. Grace felt her pulse hammering. They'll know it failed. Good. Caleb checked his rifle. Let them know. Let them wonder. Let them make the next move scared instead of confident. He looked at Grace. Tomorrow you ride to Sheridan. You make Clayton Voss believe he's won, that you're ready to sell, that you're broken. That's a lie. It's bait. There's a difference. Grace thought of Father Thomas, of the 10 children sleeping inside, of little Constance who had not spoken in a month. How long do I have to pretend? 3 days, then we spring the trap, and we end this. The sun was setting over the Bighorn Mountains, painting the sky red and gold, and Sister Grace Hartwell stood on the porch where a rattlesnake had tried to kill her, watching the light fade and wondering if she would live to see another sunrise. Inside the mission, the children were gathering for evening prayers. Outside, Caleb Stone cleaned his rifle and prepared for war. And 40 miles south in Sheridan, Clayton Voss received word that Sister Grace was still alive. He did not smile, but he did send for more men. That evening, they gathered in the chapel. Caleb Stone, Sister Grace, Thaddeus, Ezekiel, the 4 of them sitting in the pews while the younger children slept in the dormitory next door. A single candle burned on the altar. Outside, the August night pressed against the windows. Hot, still, the kind of night where trouble moved in silence. Caleb spoke quietly. His voice carried the weight of 20 years of warfare. We're outnumbered, outgunned, isolated. The sheriff won't help because Voss owns him. The nearest army fort is 100 miles north. We can't run because the children can't travel that distance in one night. And we can't defend this place against a full assault. Grace listened, her hands folded in her lap. Steady now, the fear from earlier had burned away. What remained was something harder. So what do we do? Caleb looked at her. We use the only advantage we have. Voss thinks you're alone and scared. He thinks the snake trap failed by luck. He thinks you're ready to break. I'm not. I know, but he doesn't. Ezekiel leaned forward. You want Sister Grace to go into town, to face Voss? Yes. Thaddeus stood up fast, angry, protective. That's insane. He'll kill her. Not in front of witnesses. Caleb's voice stayed calm, patient. Voss is building a respectable empire. He can't murder a nun on Main Street in broad daylight, but he can pressure her, manipulate her, make her an offer. Grace understood. You want me to accept? No, I want you to make him believe you're considering it. Tell him you need time. 3 days to pray, to prepare the children. Make him think you are breaking. And then he'll send men to secure the property before you change your mind. We'll be waiting." Grace was silent for a long moment. She looked at the altar, at the cross hanging above it, at the God she had sworn to serve with honesty and truth. "Mr. Stone, I'm a nun. Deception is a sin. So is murder, and letting murderers walk free. It's still a lie." Caleb stood, walked to the window, looked out at the dark. "Sister, I've killed men, dozens of them, during the war, after the war. Some of them deserved it, some of them probably didn't. I'll answer for that when my time comes." He turned back. "But I never killed a child, never let a child die when I could prevent it. You've got 10 of them sleeping next door. Voss wants them gone. Dead or scattered, he doesn't care which." Grace felt the words like a physical blow. "So you tell me." Caleb's voice was soft now, almost gentle. "Is it a greater sin to deceive a killer or to let him kill?" Grace closed her eyes, prayed, not for guidance. She already knew what she had to do. She prayed for forgiveness in advance. When she opened her eyes, her voice was steady. "Tomorrow morning, I'll ride to Sheridan." Caleb nodded once. "Good. Thad and I will prepare defenses here, firing positions, escape routes. When Voss's men come, we'll be ready." Thaddeus still looked uncertain. "Mr. Stone, you really think 3 of us can hold off however many men Voss sends?" "No, I think we make them believe the cost is too high. We make them scared. And scared men make mistakes." Ezekiel spat tobacco juice into a cup. "How long we got?" 3 days if we're lucky, 2 if we're not." Grace stood. "Then I should practice looking defeated." Caleb almost smiled. "Sister, you just agreed to deceive a land Paron into thinking you're broken so we can ambush his hired guns. I don't think you need much practice." Despite everything, Grace felt her lips twitch, the first hint of a smile in 3 months. They spent the next 2 hours preparing. Caleb walked the property with Thaddeus pointing out defensive positions. The chapel bell tower had clear sight lines in every direction. The barn loft offered cover and elevation. The root cellar could hide the younger children. Ezekiel checked their weapons. Father Thomas's Winchester rifle, the old Navy Colt from his days as a trapper, the shotgun from the mission supplies. Grace practiced her performance. She mussed her hair, skipped washing her face, made herself look tired, worn, defeated. It was not difficult. She had felt all those things for months. At midnight, Caleb gave her his army compass. Brass, dented, the glass cracked but still functional. "If things go wrong, if we can't hold them, take the children north to Fort Laramie. Use this. Don't stop. Don't look back." Grace took the compass. It was warm from his pocket. "And you, I'll make sure no one follows." She understood what that meant. Caleb Stone would stay behind, would fight until there was no fight left, would die so the children could escape. "Mr. Stone, get some sleep, sister. Tomorrow you've got to convince a killer that you're giving up. That takes energy." Grace wanted to say something else. "Thank you. Be careful. Don't die for us." But the words stuck in her throat. Caleb seemed to understand anyway. He nodded once, then disappeared into the darkness to take first watch. Grace went to her small room, knelt by her bed, and prayed until dawn, the performance. Morning came cold despite the August heat. Grace had not slept. Her eyes were red. Her hands shook slightly. It made the performance easier. She dressed in her habit, did not brush her hair, left it loose and tangled under her veil, splashed water on her face but did not dry it completely. Let the dampness show. When she walked outside, Caleb was waiting with her horse already saddled. "You look terrible." "Thank you. I mean it as a compliment." He handed her the reins. "Remember, you're exhausted, scared, alone. You're considering his offer because you have no other choice." "I understand. And sister," Caleb's voice dropped, "if something goes wrong, if Voss tries anything in town, fire your pistol twice. I'll hear it. I'll come." Grace touched the small revolver hidden in her cloak pocket. "How will you hear it from here?" "Because I'll be on the ridge a half-mile south, watching." She looked at him, at this man who had ridden down from the mountains for a dead friend. who was now willing to take for children he had met yesterday. Mr. Stone, why are you really doing this? Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then, because Thomas gave me a reason to keep living when I had none. Because some things are worth fighting for even when you're tired of fighting. Because you remind me that there's still good people in this world worth protecting. He stepped back. Now ride, and make it convincing. Grace rode. The journey to Sheridan took 3 hours. The sun climbed, the heat built. Grace let herself slump in the saddle, let the exhaustion show. When she reached Main Street, people stared. She stopped at the general store first, bought salt, flour, a little bacon. The merchant wrapped them quickly, nervously. He had heard about the supply wagon driver. Everyone had. Sister, you be careful. Grace just nodded, too tired to speak. She tied the supplies to her saddle, walked her horse down the street, past the livery, past the saloon, toward the land office. Clayton Voss sat on a chair outside his building, reading a newspaper, drinking coffee. He looked up as she passed. Sister Grace? He stood, concerned. Gentlemen, you look unwell. Grace stopped, turned, let her shoulders sag. Mr. Voss, he walked toward her, slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. Sister, please, sit. Can I get you water? No, thank you, I'm fine. You don't look fine. He gestured to the chair he had vacated. Please, Wishwa. Grace hesitated, then sat. It was not entirely an act. She was exhausted. Voss pulled over another chair, sat across from her, close but not threatening. His face showed nothing but compassion. Sister, I heard there was trouble at the mission. A snake. Grace's heart jumped. How did he know? Then she understood. The spotter on the ridge. The man who had watched yesterday. He had reported back. Yes, it was close if Mr. Stone hadn't been there. Voss's expression flickered, just for a second. Mr. Stone, Caleb Stone from the mountains. He was Father Thomas's friend. He came to help. Voss leaned back slightly, calculating. I see. And is Mr. Stone still at the mission? Grace shook her head. This was the lie Caleb had told her to tell. The most important lie. No, he left this morning, said it wasn't his fight, that he had his own life to live. She let her voice crack slightly. He was kind to come at all. Voss relaxed. She saw it in his shoulders, in his hands. He believed her. Sister Grace, I'm going to be direct with you, because I think you are a reasonable woman in an impossible situation. He leaned forward, his voice gentle, understanding. You can't hold that mission alone. You have 10 children depending on you. No priest, no help, no supplies. And now you have dangerous wildlife threatening you. Grace said nothing. My offer still stands. $8,000, more than fair. You can take the children to Denver, to a proper orphanage with resources, with safety. The church would want that for them by them. Grace looked at her hands. I've been thinking about it. Voss went very still. I don't know if I can keep fighting Mr. Voss. I'm so tired. The children are scared. Little Constance hasn't spoken in 6 weeks. I don't know what to do anymore. The words were true. That was what made them convincing. Grace was tired. The children were scared. She just was not giving up. Voss's voice became softer, warmer. Sister, let me help you. Sell me the property, take the money, start fresh somewhere safe. Grace lifted her eyes. Let him see the exhaustion, the fear, the doubt. I need time to pray, to decide what's right. Of course, how much time? 3 days. If you don't hear from me by Sunday evening. She let the sentence hang. Voss understood. It means you've accepted. Grace nodded. It means I've made my peace with leaving. Voss stood, extended his hand. Sister Grace, I know this is difficult, but you're making the right choice for yourself and for those children. Grace stood, did not take his hand. Thank you, Mr. Voss. I should get back. She walked to her horse, mounted, rode slowly down Main Street. She did not look back, but she felt Voss watching her, felt his eyes on her back, felt his satisfaction. He thought he had won. Good. Once Grace was out of town, she kicked her horse to a gallop. The exhaustion fell away. Her spine straightened, her jaw set. She had just lied to a killer, had looked him in the eyes and deceived him, and she felt no guilt. Only a cold, sharp clarity. Whatever came next, she was ready. The trap is set. Grace reached the mission by early afternoon. Caleb was waiting on the porch. He searched her face. How did it go? He believed me. He thinks I'll sell. He thinks you're gone. He thinks he's won. Caleb nodded slowly. Then he'll move fast, tomorrow night. Maybe tonight. How do you know? Because he can't risk you changing your mind. Can't risk someone else offering help. He'll secure the property before Sunday. Count on it. Thaddeus emerged from the barn. Defenses are ready, Mr. Stone. Bell tower, loft, root cellar. Good. Get the children inside. Lock the doors. No one outside after dark. Ezekiel limped out from the chapel. Weapons cleaned and loaded. Got 40 shells for the shotgun, 100 rounds for the rifles. Not enough if they bring a dozen men, but it'll have to do. Grace dismounted. Her legs were shaking. The adrenaline from the performance was wearing off. What do we do now? We wait, and we prepare to make them regret coming. The afternoon stretched long, hot, tense. Caleb positioned himself in the chapel bell tower, the highest point on the property. He could see for miles in every direction. Thaddeus took the barn loft with the Winchester. Ezekiel stayed with the younger children in the main building, ready to move them to the root cellar at the first sign of trouble. Grace tried to keep the children calm. She read to them, led prayers, pretended everything was normal. But little Constance knew. The 4-year-old sat clutching her rag doll, silent, her eyes too wide, too knowing. Grace knelt beside her. It's going to be all right, Connie. Mr. Stone won't let anything happen to us. Constance did not speak, but she reached out, touched Grace's hand, and that small gesture broke Grace's heart more than any words could have. Night fell, the temperature dropped, the stars came out, clear, bright, indifferent. Grace sat in the chapel, alone, kneeling before the altar. She was not praying, she was thinking. About her father, about watching him die at Gettysburg, about holding his hand while the life drained out of him, about Father Thomas, about finding him in the creek, about knowing she could not save him, about the children sleeping in the next building, about Constance's silence, about Thaddeus's hard eyes, about all of them depending on her to keep them alive. She heard footsteps, looked up. Caleb stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the night. Couldn't sleep. No, he walked forward, sat in the pew beside her, not too close, respectful of her vows, but close enough that she could feel his presence. They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Grace spoke. Mr. Stone, tell me the truth. Can we survive this? Caleb did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was honest. I don't know, sister. I've been in worse fights and lived. I've been in easier fights and lost good men. It depends on how many Voss sends, how determined they are, and how lucky we get. That's not very reassuring. You asked for truth? Not comfort. Grace almost laughed. Almost. Why did you really come down from those mountains? I know Thomas was your friend. But 20 years is a long time. People change. Friendships fade. Caleb looked at his hands. Scarred, weathered. The hands of a man who had lived hard. Thomas saved my soul in '64, Atlanta campaign. I was drowning. Not in water, in blood, in guilt. Every rebel I'd killed, every friend I'd lost, every terrible thing I'd seen. It all piled up until I couldn't breathe. He paused. I was going to desert, run to Mexico, or put a bullet in my own head. Hadn't decided which. What stopped you? Thomas found me, drunk, gun in my hand, and he sat down beside me. Didn't preach, didn't judge, just sat. Then he said, Caleb, you think you're the only man in this army carrying ghosts? We all are. But some of us choose to carry them forward, to do something good with the weight. And some of us let the ghosts drag us down. You get to choose which man you want to be. Caleb's voice was quiet now, almost a whisper. I chose to keep walking because he showed me I could still do good, still matter. still stand for something. Grace felt tears on her face. She did not wipe them away. I came down from those mountains because Thomas asked me to watch over his mission, to protect his children. I failed him by coming too late, but I won't fail him by running now. He turned to look at her. And I won't fail you either. Grace reached out, took his hand, not as a woman to a man, as a warrior to a warrior, as someone who understood that some battles must be fought even when you are tired of fighting. Thank you. They sat together in the dark chapel, holding hands, waiting for the violence to come. And come it did, climax the first attack. 11 o'clock, Saturday night. Caleb saw them first from the bell tower. 3 riders, moving slow through the darkness. No torches, no noise. Professional. He signaled Thaddeus in the barn loft. One flash of his mirror. The boy signaled back. Ready? Caleb descended from the tower, moved into position on the main floor, near the door, Winchester rifle across his knees. Grace crouched by the side window. Shotgun loaded, her hands were steady now. The fear had burned away. What remained was focus. The riders approached, dismounted 50 yards out, tied their horses, came forward on foot. Smart, harder to hear, harder to hit. Caleb watched them through the cracked door. 3 men. The first was big, 6 feet tall, broad shoulders. He walked with a limp, right leg, old injury. That would be the man with the notched boot heel. The second man was lean, quick. His hand stayed near his gun. Professional killer. The third was young, nervous. His head kept turning, looking for danger. They reached the porch. The big man kicked the door. Sister Grace, Mr. Voss sent us to help you pack. Grace stood, raised the shotgun. Her voice was clear, strong. Mr. Cutler, leave. This is God's house. The man laughed. Silas Cutler, Voss's foreman, the man who had murdered Father Thomas. God ain't here, sister. Just you and that rusty scattergun. He started to push through the door. Grace fired, not at him, at the ceiling beam above his head. The blast was deafening in the enclosed space. Wood splinters exploded. Cutler dove backward. The next one goes through your chest. The lean man burst through the side window. Glass shattered. He rolled, came up with a pistol. From the barn loft, Thaddeus fired. The Winchester cracked. The lean man screamed, dropped his gun, clutched his shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers. The young man tried the back door. It opened. He stepped inside. Caleb was waiting. He came out of the shadows like a ghost, grabbed the young man's gun hand, twisted. The pistol clattered to the floor. Caleb's knife appeared at the man's throat. Don't move. The young man froze, terror in his eyes. Outside, Cutler was scrambling to his feet, blood running from his nose where he had hit the porch floor. He drew his pistol, aimed at Grace through the open door. Grace swung the shotgun like a club. The stock connected with his jaw. The crack of breaking bone echoed across the yard. Cutler went down hard. The lean man with the shoulder wound tried to run. Thaddeus fired again. The bullet kicked up dirt at his feet. He stopped, raised his good hand. 30 seconds. That was all it took. 3 attackers, all neutralized. Caleb dragged the young man outside, threw him down next to Cutler. Grace emerged with the shotgun still raised. Thaddeus climbed down from the loft, rifle steady. Ezekiel appeared with rope. They tied all 3 men, hands behind backs, ankles bound. Caleb checked them for weapons, found 3 pistols, 2 knives, a derringer hidden in a boot. The lean man was losing blood. Grace set down her shotgun, knelt beside him, examined the wound. Bullet went through, clean. You'll live if we stop the bleeding. Why would you help me? I tried to kill you. Grace looked at him. Because I'm a nun. It's what I do. She tore strips from her undergarments, made a bandage, bound his shoulder tight. The man stared at her like she was something he could not understand. Caleb hauled Silas Cutler upright. The man's jaw was shattered. Blood and teeth stained his beard, but his eyes were hate. Can you talk? Cutler tried. The words came out garbled, painful. Caleb turned to the young man. Rufus Riley, no more than 25. Pale, shaking. Son, You're looking at 20 years hard labor for assaulting a religious institution, unless you cooperate. Riley's eyes went wide. I didn't want to. Voss paid us, $200 each. Said just scare her into leaving. Shut up, Cutler tried to shout through his broken jaw. It came out as a wet gurgle. Caleb ignored him. What about Father Thomas? Riley shook his head frantically. I don't know nothing about that. I just got to town last month. Caleb pressed the knife against Riley's throat. Not cutting, just resting there. Cold, sharp. Last chance to be useful. Riley broke. Ask Cutler. He's the one. He did everything for Voss. The well, the cattle, everything. Caleb turned to Cutler. That true? Cutler spat blood. Said nothing. Caleb's face went very cold. Very still. He grabbed Cutler by the hair, dragged him to the chapel, threw him down in front of the altar. Grace followed. Thaddeus, Ezekiel. They formed a circle around the bleeding broken man. Silas Cutler. Caleb's voice was quiet, deadly. I know you. Fort Laramie, 1864. You rode with Quantrill's raiders before the war ended. You killed civilians, women, children. This is nothing new to you. Cutler's eyes showed recognition and fear. So I'm going to ask you once. Who killed Father Thomas Brennan? Silence. Caleb drew his Bowie knife, 12 inches of steel. He placed the edge against Cutler's throat. I spent 4 years tracking killers for the Union Army. I know 47 ways to make a man talk, and 23 ways to make him wish he'd died first. The father was my friend. You've got 10 seconds to start explaining before I show you all 70. Cutler's resistance crumbled. Voss, Clayton Voss, he paid me $500. Said the father was a problem. Said he had to go. How? Hit him with a rock from behind, then held him underwater, made it look like drowning. Cutler's voice was thick with blood and broken teeth. But the words were clear enough. Grace felt ice in her veins. White Mom. Father found out about the land patents, the forged documents, worth $100,000 if the railroad comes through. Father was going to tell the territorial governor. Voss couldn't let that happen. Where are the documents? I don't know. Voss keeps them somewhere. I just did what he paid me for. Thaddeus stepped forward, angry, young, righteous. You murdered a priest for money. Cutler laughed, a wet, horrible sound. You think this is the first Voss had me kill 2 ranchers before the father? Henry Blake in 66, Dutch Hoffman in early 67. Same reason, they wouldn't sell. Grace's world tilted, multiple murders, a pattern. This was not about one mission. This was about a conspiracy. Caleb hauled Cutler to his feet. You just confessed to 3 murders in front of 4 witnesses. You're going to hang. No, I ain't. Cutler grinned through bloody teeth. Because Voss is coming tomorrow. With 8 more men. And a federal marshal from Cheyenne. They're gonna evict you legal. Burn the mission. Kill anyone who resists. Your confession won't matter if you're all dead. The words hung in the air like poison. Grace found her voice. When tomorrow? Dawn, Sunday dawn. You stopped us, but you can't stop him. Caleb's face showed nothing, but Grace saw his hand tighten on the knife handle. We'll see about that. They dragged the 3 prisoners to the root cellar, locked them inside. Thaddeus stood guard. Caleb, Grace, and Ezekiel returned to the chapel. The eastern sky was starting to lighten. False dawn, an hour until sunrise. How long till they come? Grace asked. Caleb checked his pocket watch. 12 hours, maybe less if Cutler was supposed to report back. We need help. There is no help. Sheriff's bought. Bishop won't come. Army's too far. Ezekiel spat tobacco juice. So what do we do? Caleb looked at Grace. We find those documents. We get proof and we make sure Voss hangs even if we don't survive to see it. Grace thought of Father Thomas's diary, the hidden evidence. He said the proof was buried under the chapel foundation. Then we dig. They spent the next 2 hours excavating the north corner of the chapel, 3 feet down. The work was hard. The ground was packed earth and stone, but they found it, a metal strongbox, rusted, locked. Caleb smashed the lock with a hammer. The lid creaked open. Inside, wrapped in oilskin, were documents. Dozens of them. Grace lifted them out carefully, unfolded them, began to read by lantern light. Her hands started shaking. Dear God, Caleb looked over her shoulder. What is it? Grace spread the papers out. Land patents, 15 of them. Federal government seals, signatures from the territorial governor, granting 12,000 acres to Clayton Voss Land Company. Except these are forgeries. Look at the seals. The stamp is wrong. The paper is wrong. The governor's signature is wrong. I've seen real federal documents. These are fake. More papers, bank records, copied in Father Thomas's careful handwriting. Voss borrowed $85,000 from Eastern banks. Used these fake land patents as collateral. If anyone discovers the fraud, he loses everything. Goes to prison. Maybe hangs. More papers. 2 signed confessions. One from a man named Sam Porter. One anonymous. Both describing murders committed at Voss's orders. And letters. 10 of them. Written by Father Thomas to the territorial governor. To the U.S. Marshal Service. To the bishop. None of them sent, because the postmaster worked for Voss. Grace looked up at Caleb. This is why Father Thomas died. Not just for mission land. This is evidence to destroy Voss completely. Caleb nodded slowly, which means Voss will do anything to get it back, including kill every person who's seen it. Then we need to get this to authorities Voss doesn't control. Nearest honest lawman is Fort Laramie, U.S. Army Provost Marshal, 120 miles north. We can't travel that far, not with children, not with Voss coming. They were silent, trapped. They had evidence, but no way to use it. Then hoofbeats sounded outside. Everyone froze. Caleb grabbed his rifle, moved to the window. A single rider approached, hands raised, empty. Hold your fire. I'm friendly. The voice was deep, unfamiliar. Caleb stepped onto the porch, rifle raised. Identify yourself. The rider came into the light. He was a black man, 44 years old, wearing army blues, buffalo soldier uniform, sergeant stripes on his sleeves. Name's Marcus Webb, 10th Cavalry, discharged last year. I'm looking for Caleb Stone. Caleb lowered his rifle slightly. You found him. State your business. Webb dismounted, walked forward, stopped 10 feet away, raised his hands to show he was unarmed. Served with you, 64, Atlanta campaign. You saved my life at Ezra Church. Took a bullet meant for me. Caleb studied him. Recognition dawned. Webb, Marcus Webb, they promoted you after Nashville. Yes, sir, Medal of Honor. Not that it matters much these days. What are you doing in Wyoming? Prospecting, bighorns. Heard in Sheridan yesterday that Caleb Stone was making a stand against Clayton Voss. Figured you could use help. Caleb stared at him. You rode 40 miles because you heard I was in trouble. You took a bullet for me, Caleb. Army taught me to pay my debts. Besides, Webb's face was grim. I know what Voss is. Heard stories. If you're standing against him, then I'm standing with you. Grace stepped onto the porch. Mr. Webb, we're going to face 8 armed men at dawn, maybe more. You should leave while you can. Webb looked at her nun's habit, at her steady eyes, at the shotgun in her hands. Sister, I spent 20 years in the Army fighting for what's right. I ain't stopping now. He turned to Caleb. What do you need? Can you shoot? Qualified sharpshooter, buffalo rifle, 600-yard range. Can you hold a position under fire? Did it at Petersburg. Did it at Nashville. Can do it here. Caleb extended his hand. Webb shook it. Welcome to the mission, Sergeant. We've got about 10 hours before all hell breaks loose. Let's make them count. As the sun rose over the Bighorn Mountains, painting the sky red and gold, the defenders of St. Catherine's mission prepared for siege. 4 adults, 1 teenager, 10 children, against a land baron, 8 hired guns, and a fake federal marshal. The odds were not good, but Caleb Stone had survived worse. And Sister Grace Hartwell had already decided that if she died today, she would die protecting the innocent. Some things were worth dying for. The children's breakfast was quiet that morning. Grace led prayers, asked God for strength, for courage, for mercy. She did not ask for victory. She had learned a long time ago that God's mercy looked different than human mercy. Outside, Caleb and Marcus Webb positioned themselves for the coming battle. And in Sheridan, Clayton Voss gathered his men. The storm was coming. Sunday, dawn came cold and merciless. Caleb Stone stood in the chapel bell tower, watching the eastern horizon. Marcus Webb crouched beside him. Both men had rifles. Both men had seen war. Both men knew what was coming. "How many you think?" Webb asked. Cutler said 8 plus a fake marshal. "Could be more. We've got 4 adults, 1 boy, against 9 or 10 professionals." "Yes. Not good odds." "No," Webb checked his buffalo rifle. 50 caliber sharps. The same model Caleb carried. "We making a stand here, or trying to evacuate?" Caleb looked down at the mission buildings, at the chapel, at the dormitory where 10 children slept, at Sister Grace checking supplies in the yard. "We make them pay for every inch. We hold until help comes or until we can't hold anymore." "What help?" "Don't know yet, but something will break our way. It has to." Webb smiled without humor. "That's called faith, Caleb. Didn't know you had any." "I don't, but she does." Caleb nodded toward Grace. "And I've learned that sometimes other people's faith is enough." Below Grace was organizing the children. The youngest 4 would hide in the root cellar with Ezekiel. The older 6 would help reload weapons, carry water, be runners between positions. Thaddeus stood guard over the 3 prisoners in the barn. Silas Cutler with his shattered jaw, Obadiah Dawson with his shoulder wound, Rufus Riley trembling with fear. Everything was ready. Everything except the one thing they needed most: time. At 7 o'clock, a rider appeared on the southern ridge. Not hostile. A single man on horseback. Moving slow, hands visible, empty. Caleb raised his rifle, sighted. His finger rested on the trigger. The rider came closer. Older man, gray hair, wearing a black suit, no gun belt visible. He stopped 50 yards out, raised his voice. "Caleb Stone, Sister Grace Hartwell. I am Judge William Aldrich, Circuit Judge for Wyoming Territory. I request parley under flag of truce." Caleb and Webb exchanged glances. "Could be a trick," Webb said. "Could be." Caleb studied the man through his rifle sight. "But he's alone, unarmed. And I know that name. Judge Aldrich comes through Sheridan once a month. Reputation for honesty." He lowered his rifle. "Cover me." Caleb descended from the tower, walked out to meet the judge. His hand stayed near his pistol. Judge Aldrich dismounted. He was 67 years old, thin, stooped, but his eyes were sharp. "Mr. Stone, thank you for not shooting me. You've got 2 minutes to explain why I shouldn't." Aldrich pulled papers from his saddlebag. "Sister Grace brought evidence to me yesterday evening, after she returned from town. Land patents, confessions, bank records, proof of Clayton Voss's fraud and murder." Caleb went very still. "Sister Grace did what? She came to my hotel room, showed me everything you found under the chapel, asked me to issue arrest warrants. And I've issued them for Voss, for Silas Cutler, for conspiracy, fraud, and murder." Aldrich's face was grim. "But Mr. Stone, I have no men to enforce them. Sheriff Donovan is on Voss's payroll. My clerk is old. I'm old. Against 8 armed men, we're useless. So why are you here?" "Because Sister Grace asked me to witness. She said, 'Judge, if Voss attacks the mission today, you need to see it. You need to survive it. Because someone has to tell the truth about what happened here.'" Caleb felt something like admiration. Grace had not just set a trap for Voss. She had set a legal trap, with a judge as witness. "Where is she now?" "In the chapel, praying." Aldrich looked at the mission, at the children visible through windows. "Mr. Stone, I fought in the Mexican War. I've seen battle. This is going to be a slaughter unless something changes." "I know." "Then let me help. I may be old, but I can still fire a rifle." Caleb studied him, saw the determination beneath the wrinkles. "Can you hold a position?" "Did it at Chapultepec. Can do it here." "Then welcome to the mission, Judge. You can take the barn loft. Thaddeus will show you where." As they walked back, Grace emerged from the chapel. She saw the judge. Her eyes widened. "Judge Aldrich, you came." "Sister, you asked me to witness. I'm witnessing." Grace smiled. The first real smile in months. Thank you. Then her expression changed. She looked past the judge, past Caleb, to the southern ridge. 9 riders had appeared. They sat their horses in a line, watching, waiting. Even from a distance, Caleb could pick out Clayton Voss, center of the line, white horse, the symbol of false righteousness. So it begins, Webb said quietly. Caleb turned to everyone. Positions. Now. Grace gathered the younger children, led them to the root cellar. Constance clung to her doll, silent, her eyes enormous. Grace knelt before her. Connie, Mr. Ezekiel will keep you safe. I promise. The girl touched Grace's face, still no words. But the gesture said everything. Grace descended into the cellar with them, made sure they were hidden, secure. Then she climbed back out, closed the door, locked it. She picked up her shotgun. Sister, Caleb's voice made her turn. You don't have to fight. You can stay with the children. Grace met his eyes. Those children are my responsibility. This mission is my calling. And Clayton Voss murdered Father Thomas. I'm fighting. Caleb nodded once. Chapel window, east side, good sight lines. Stay low. The defenders took their positions. Caleb bell tower, 360-degree view, Sharp's rifle, Webb barn roof, north side, Buffalo rifle, Judge Aldrich barn loft, west window, Winchester, Grace Chapel ground floor, east window, shotgun, Thaddeus Chapel ground floor, west window, pistol and spare rifle, 5 defenders, 10 attackers. The math was not good, but the defensive positions were strong, and sometimes that was enough. At 8 o'clock, the 9 riders moved forward. Climaxed the siege. They came slow, deliberate, a military formation. Voss had trained them well. When they reached 200 yards, they stopped. Clayton Voss rode forward alone. He carried a document, held it high. Sister Grace Hartwell. His voice carried across the valley, smooth, confident. I have United States Marshal Thomas Bryan here with an eviction notice. You are squatting on private land. This property belongs to the Voss Land Company. You have 10 minutes to vacate peacefully. Beside him, a man wearing a federal marshal's badge rode forward. The badge gleamed in the morning sun. Fake, but it looked real. Judge Aldrich stepped onto the chapel porch. His voice rang out clear and strong. Clayton Voss, I am Judge William Aldrich. I have reviewed the evidence. Your land patents are forgeries. Your marshal is an imposter. I have issued warrants for your arrest on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and murder. The words echoed across the valley. Voss's face went pale, then red, then something cold and hard. You senile fool. You think paper matters out here. You think law matters. Yes, Mr. Voss, I do. Surrender now or face the consequences. Voss laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. The only consequence today is yours, Judge. He turned to his men, to the fake marshal, to the 8 hired guns. Take the mission. Kill anyone who resists. I want that evidence destroyed. I want these people dead. Do it now. The 9 riders charged. Caleb fired first. From the bell tower, the Sharp's rifle cracked like thunder. The lead rider's horse went down. The animal screamed, thrashed, threw its rider into the dirt. Webb fired. His buffalo rifle roared. A second rider clutched his shoulder, wheeled his horse around, retreated. 7 riders kept coming. They dismounted at 100 yards, took cover behind the water trough, behind the broken wagon, behind scattered lumber. They returned fire. Bullets slammed into the chapel walls, into the barn, into the bell tower where Caleb crouched. Wood splintered, stone chipped, the air filled with smoke and noise. Grace fired her shotgun through the east window. The blast scattered the men behind the wagon. They dove for better cover. Judge Aldrich fired from the barn loft. His aim was steady, practiced. A man who remembered how to fight. Thaddeus fired from the chapel. His hands shook, but he kept loading, kept firing. The battle raged for 20 minutes. Back and forth, attack and defense. Neither side gaining ground. Then one of Voss's men made a mistake. He ran from the water trough to the barn, trying to flank, trying to get a better angle. Marcus Webb saw him, tracked him, Fired. The man went down, clutching his leg, screaming. His companions dragged him back to cover. 6 attackers left, plus Voss and the fake marshal hanging back out of range. But the defenders were running low on ammunition. Caleb had 40 rounds left for his rifle. Grace had 12 shotgun shells. The others were counting bullets like misers counting gold. At 9 o'clock, Voss changed tactics. He sent 2 men to the north side, to circle around, to attack from behind. Webb saw them, called down to Caleb. 2 flanking north side. Let them come. When they hit the barn, I'll drop down and take them. The 2 men crept forward, using trees for cover, moving quiet, professional. They reached the barn's north wall, pressed against it. One pulled out a torch, lit it. Fire, the oldest weapon, the most effective. Webb fired down through a gap in the roof boards. His bullet missed, but it made them look up. Caleb dropped from the bell tower using a rope, 30 feet straight down. Landed in a crouch, his pistol already drawn. Drop it. The man with the torch spun, tried to aim his rifle. Caleb fired twice. Both shots center mass. The man fell. The second man fired. His bullet grazed Caleb's left arm. Blood welled hot and red. Caleb fired again. The man stumbled, fell, did not get up. 4 attackers left, but Caleb was wounded, and the torch had fallen into dry grass. Flames spread fast. Fire, Webb shouted. North side, the grass is burning. The flames climbed the barn wall, caught the dry wood. Within seconds, smoke poured from the structure. Judge Aldrich scrambled down from the loft. Thaddeus ran out with buckets of water, but it was too late. The barn was gone. 10 minutes later, it collapsed. Flames reached 50 feet high. Black smoke choked the air, and the orphanage building 30 feet from the barn caught fire from flying embers. Grace saw it happen, saw the roof ignite, saw the flames spread. She ran from the chapel. No, the children's beds. They're things. Caleb grabbed her. They're safe in the cellar. Don't throw your life away. Miss Grace struggled. 2 years of work, everything they own. Buildings can be rebuilt, they can't. The orphanage burned for 20 minutes, then collapsed into ash and embers. 2 structures gone, half the mission destroyed. Grace stood watching, tears on her face. Not from sadness, from rage. Voss had taken Father Thomas, had tried to kill her, and now had destroyed the children's home. Enough. She picked up her shotgun, reloaded it with shaking hands. Her voice was ice. Mr. Stone, how many are left? 4, plus Voss and his fake marshal. Where's Voss? Caleb pointed. The land baron had moved closer during the confusion, was now behind the water trough, 60 yards away. Grace's eyes narrowed. Can you hit him from here? With the rifle, yes, but killing him makes us murderers. We need him alive, to testify, to face justice, and then we take him alive. How? Grace smiled. It was not a kind smile. By giving him what he wants. She stood up, stepped into the open, raised her hands. Mr. Voss, I surrender, you win. Take the land. Just don't hurt the children, Caleb hissed. Sister, what are you doing? Grace whispered back. Bait. Voss stood up slowly from behind the water trough, suspicious. Where's the evidence? In the chapel under the altar. Take it, just let us go. Voss studied her, looking for the trap, but he saw what he wanted to see. A broken woman, defeated, desperate. Come here, sister. Alone, slowly. Grace walked forward, hands raised, shotgun left behind. She walked 20 yards, 30, 40. Voss emerged from cover. His pistol was drawn, aimed at her chest. Where are the documents? Chapel. Like I said, you're lying. I'm not. You can check. Just please. Let the children go. Voss grabbed her arm, pulled her close, used her as a shield. His pistol pressed against her ribs. Stone Webb. If anyone fires, she dies. He started backing toward the chapel, dragging Grace with him. Caleb watched from the bell tower, his rifle trained on Voss's head, but he could not risk the shot, not with Grace so close. Voss reached the chapel, kicked the door open, pulled Grace in down. For 10 seconds there was silence. Then Voss's voice muffled through the walls. The documents aren't here. Grace's voice. Calm, steady. No, they're with Judge Aldrich, sealed, ready to send to the territorial governor. A pause, then Voss screaming. You lied, you stupid lying. A crash, furniture breaking. Caleb was moving before he thought. Down from the tower, across the yard, Webb and Thaddeus following. They burst through the chapel door. Voss had his hands around Grace's throat, choking her. Her face was red, her eyes bulging. You've destroyed everything, Voss was shouting, spittle flying. Everything I built, everything I worked for. Caleb aimed his pistol. Let her go, Voss. No, she ruined me, she... A child's scream cut through the air. Everyone froze. It came from outside, from behind the chapel, from the root cellar entrance. Little Constance, 4 years old, mute for 2 months. She was screaming, Bad man! Bad man! Voss released Grace, spun toward the sound, his face lit with mad inspiration. The children, the orphans, they're in the cellar. He ran, out the back door, toward the cellar entrance. Caleb sprinted after him, but his wounded arm slowed him down. Voss reached the cellar door, pulled it open, started down the stairs. Ezekiel was waiting with a pistol. Don't you dare, Voss shot him. The old man fell, blood spreading across his chest. Inside the cellar, 5 children huddled together. Constance, Louisa, 3 others, terrified. Voss grabbed Constance, held her in front of him like a shield, his pistol pressed to her head. Nobody move, I've got the child. Caleb appeared at the cellar entrance, his pistol aimed, but he could not shoot, not with the girl. Voss, let her go, she's 4 years old. Stone, tell your men to stand down. Tell them to drop their weapons, or I kill her. Behind Caleb, Webb and Thaddeus had their guns raised. Judge Aldrich, Grace gasping for air but moving forward. All of them aimed at Voss, all of them helpless, because he had a child. Caleb's mind raced, calculating angles, distances, risks. He could not make the shot, not without hitting Constance. The girl was too small. Voss held her too close. What do you want? A horse-safe passage out of the territory, and I take the girl with me until I'm safe. If you hurt her, then maybe you should give me what I want. Caleb looked at Grace, at her swollen throat, at her desperate eyes. He looked at little Constance, silent again, tears running down her face. He thought about Father Thomas, about promises made and broken, and he made his choice. All right, you can have a horse, you can leave, but the girl stays. No deal. Then I'm coming down there, and we settle this like men. Voss laughed. You're unarmed. I've got a gun to a child's head. How is that settling anything? Caleb set his pistol on the ground, his rifle, his knife, everything. Now I'm unarmed, just you and me. Let the girl go. We fight. You win, you walk away. I win, you face trial. Why would I agree to that? Because you're not just a killer, Voss. You're a Confederate officer. You fought for honor once, before the greed took over. Prove you remember what that means. For a long moment, Voss was silent. Then he shoved Constance away. The girl ran to Grace, buried her face in the nun's habit. Voss climbed out of the cellar, holstered his pistol. All right, Stone, man to man. But when I kill you, I'm taking that evidence and burning it. And I'm taking this mission, and there's nothing any of you can do about it. We'll see. They circled each other in the yard. 2 men, 1 young war, 1 old war, both carrying ghosts. Voss struck first, fast, vicious. He was younger, stronger, desperate. His fist connected with Caleb's jaw. Caleb's head snapped back. Blood filled his mouth. Caleb countered, low, hard, into Voss's ribs. The land baron gasped, stumbled. They grappled, fell, rolled in the dirt. Voss pulled a knife from his boot, slashed. The blade cut across Caleb's wounded arm. The pain was blinding. Caleb grabbed Voss's wrist, twisted. The knife clattered away. They stood, breathing hard, both bleeding, both exhausted. Voss charged again. It tackled Caleb. They crashed into the chapel wall. Voss's hands found Caleb's throat, squeezed. Caleb's vision darkened. His lungs burned. He remembered Atlanta, remembered drowning, remembered Father Thomas pulling him from the river. You get to choose which man you want to be. Caleb's knee came up, connected with Voss's stomach. The grip loosened. Caleb threw him off, stood. His pistol lay 10 feet away. So did Voss's. They both ran for their weapons. Caleb got there first. He aimed. His finger on the trigger. Voss on his knees. Defenseless. One shot. That was all it would take. Caleb had killed men for less. During the war. After the war. Men who had done terrible things. Men who probably deserved it. But Father Thomas's voice echoed in his memory. Vengeance will poison your soul. And Grace's voice from the chapel. Justice. Not vengeance. Caleb's hands shook. The pistol felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Do it, Voss shouted. You're a killer. You've always been a killer. Prove me right. Caleb looked at him. At this man who had murdered Father Thomas, who had tried to murder Grace, who had destroyed everything good for money and pride. He could kill him, should kill him. The world would be better for it. But he lowered the pistol. No, Thomas taught me better than that. He walked forward, struck Voss with the pistol butt. The land baron collapsed, unconscious. Caleb stood over him, breathing hard, his arm bleeding, his body aching. But his soul was clean. Behind him, Grace was crying, not from fear, from relief, the aftermath. Sheriff Donovan arrived an hour later with 6 deputies, too late to help, just in time to arrest people. But when he saw Judge Aldrich standing there, saw the evidence, saw Clayton Voss in chains, he knew which side to choose. Mr. Voss, you're under arrest for murder, fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Voss said nothing. His eyes were empty, defeated. They loaded him onto a wagon, along with Silas Cutler and the other captured men. 10 prisoners total. Grace knelt beside Ezekiel. The old man was alive. Barely. The bullet had gone through his shoulder. Missed the vital organs. Stubborn old goat, she whispered while bandaging him. You don't get to die yet. Ezekiel smiled weakly. Wouldn't dream of it, sister. The children emerged from the cellar. Constance ran to Grace, Louisa, the others. They surrounded her, held her, needed her, and Grace held them back. These 10 souls she had sworn to protect. 2 buildings burned, 1 man shot, the mission in ruins, but everyone alive, everyone safe. That night they slept in the chapel, all of them together, adults and children, wrapped in blankets, exhausted. Caleb stood watch on the porch, his arm bandaged, his body battered. Marcus Webb sat beside him. You could have killed him. I know. Most men would have. I'm not most men, not anymore. Webb smiled. Thomas would be proud. Maybe. They sat in silence, watching the stars. And in the chapel, Sister Grace Hartwell prayed for the first time in months, without fear, the trial. 2 weeks later, Sheridan Courthouse was packed. 300 people, standing room only. Everyone wanted to see Clayton Voss fall. Judge Aldrich presided. The federal prosecutor came from Cheyenne, a real one this time. The evidence was overwhelming. Forged land patents examined by government surveyors. Fake seals, wrong paper, wrong signatures. Silas Cutler's signed confession read aloud. I murdered Father Thomas Brennan on orders from Clayton Voss. I held him underwater until he drowned. The courtroom gasped. Bank records showed $85,000 borrowed against fraudulent collateral. 2 previous murders, Henry Blake, Dutch Hoffman, both killed for refusing to sell. Sister Grace testified, described 3 months of terror, the snake trap, the siege, the children's trauma. She held up Constance's burned rag doll, all that remained from the fire. Mr. Voss didn't just try to steal land, he tried to destroy hope. Caleb Stone testified. His military record read into evidence. Medal of Valor, 20 years service. His word carried weight. Tracked the evidence of murder, conspiracy, and fraud spanning 3 years. Clayton Voss built an empire on lies and blood. Marcus Webb testified. Judge Aldrich testified. Even Sheriff Donovan, trying to save his own career, testified against Voss. The defense had nothing. Voss's lawyer tried to argue business disputes, misunderstandings, but the evidence was too strong. Voss took the stand against his lawyer's advice. I fought for the Confederacy. I lost everything, My home, my family, my way of life. This was my chance to rebuild. That land was wasted on orphans and religious fanatics. I brought civilization to this territory. Judge Aldrich's voice was ice. Mr. Voss, you brought greed and violence. That is not civilization. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. First-degree murder, fraud, conspiracy, arson, attempted murder. The sentence was life imprisonment, hard labor at the territorial prison. Silas Cutler received death by hanging. Executed 1 month later, the other men received 3 to 12 years. When they led Voss away in chains, he looked at Grace one last time. You've destroyed everything I built. Grace met his eyes. No, Mr. Voss, you destroyed yourself. I just made sure everyone knew it. Rebuilding Fall came to Wyoming territory. The townspeople of Sheridan donated lumber, nails, windows, $400 worth of supplies. The railroad company, embarrassed by their association with Voss, donated $3,000. A new orphanage rose on the ashes of the old, larger, stronger, 2 stories, 12 beds, a schoolroom, a proper kitchen. Caleb Stone helped build it. His carpentry was rough but solid, the kind of work that lasted. Marcus Webb stayed, became the mission's groundskeeper and guard, built a watchtower. No more surprise attacks. The mission school opened with 35 students, orphans and town children together. Grace taught reading, arithmetic, Bible studies. Caleb taught woodcraft, practical skills, how to survive, how to be strong without being cruel. Constance started speaking again, slowly, quietly, but the words came back. One day she walked up to Caleb while he was hammering, tugged his sleeve. Uncle Stone, he looked down. This tiny girl who had survived so much. Yes, Connie. Thank you for saving us. Caleb's throat tightened. He knelt down to her level. You're welcome, little one. But your sister Grace did most of the saving. I just helped. Constance hugged him, this scarred, weathered mountain man who had learned how to be gentle. And Caleb Stone, who had spent 20 years running from people, hugged her back. 3 years later, spring 1870, a wagon arrived at St. Catherine's Mission. Inside was a boy, 13 years old, thin, haunted. His parents had died from typhoid fever. His name was Samuel Hartwell. No relation to Grace, just a coincidence of names. Grace took him in, like she had taken in 20 others since the trial. Samuel was angry, hurt, didn't trust anyone. Caleb recognized the look. He had worn it himself once. He took the boy under his wing, taught him to track, to shoot, to work with his hands. And slowly over months, Samuel started to heal. 22 years later, the years passed. Grace ran St. Catherine's Mission for 25 years, from 1892. 200 orphans came through those doors. Most grew up strong, good, ready for the world. 15 became teachers, 12 ranchers, 8 doctors or nurses, 3 ministers, 2 lawyers. Samuel Hartwell became one of the ranchers. Successful, married, 3 children. He never forgot where he came from. Caleb stayed at the mission, never went back to the mountains, found he preferred people to solitude. He and Grace worked together for 2.5 decades, not as lovers, as partners, as warriors who had fought together and survived. They never spoke of love, never needed to. Their love was in the buildings they repaired, the children they raised, the life they built from ashes. In November 1892, Sister Grace Hartwell died peacefully. Heart failure, 52 years old. She was surrounded by former orphans. 50 of them came from across Wyoming, from Colorado, from California, all of them wanting to say goodbye to the woman who had saved them. Her last words whispered to Caleb were simple. Thank you for staying. Thomas chose right. They buried her next to Father Thomas in the small cemetery on the hill. The headstone read Sister Grace Hartwell, 1840 to 1892. She stood when others ran. Epilogue. Montana winter, 1892. The fire had burned low in the cabin. Caleb Stone, 70 years old, finished his story. His voice was hoarse from talking, but his eyes were clear. Samuel Hartwell sat across from him, tears on his face. Uncle Caleb, That's how Grandma Grace saved us all. That's how she saved me too, son. Gave me a reason to stop running from life. Samuel's wife, Mary, stood in the doorway, their three children sleeping in the wagon outside. We should go, she said softly. It's a long journey to California. Samuel stood, walked to Caleb, embraced him. Come with us to California. Start fresh. Caleb shook his head. I'm 70 years old, too old to start fresh. And besides, someone needs to watch over the mission. Grace asked me to. Can't break that promise now. Who'll watch over you? Caleb smiled. Don't need watching. I've got Marcus Webb down the hill. Got 100 former orphans who visit every year. Got more family than any man deserves. He pulled something from his pocket. Father Thomas's old Bible. Worn, scarred, loved. This was Thomas's. He gave it to Grace. Now I'm giving it to you. For your children. Samuel took the Bible, opened it. Inside the cover was an inscription. To Sister Grace Courage, Faith, Justice, Father Thomas, 1869. And below it, in newer ink, to Samuel. Never forget where you came from or who loved you enough to stay. Caleb Stone, 1892. Samuel's voice broke. I won't forget Uncle Caleb, I promise. Good. Now get out of here before you make an old man cry. They said their goodbyes. The wagon rolled away. Caleb stood on the porch watching until they disappeared into the snow. Then he went inside, stoked the fire, sat in his chair, and thought about a rattlesnake, a prayer. And the woman who had taught him that love comes in many forms, the woman who didn't scream when she found Father Thomas dead, the woman who only screamed when she saw a mountain man ride down from the hills, not from fear, from relief, because she knew she wasn't alone anymore, and neither was he. Caleb Stone sat by the fire. An old man now, but not a lonely one. He had lived longer than he deserved, longer than he expected. And every extra year was a gift from a nun who had stood when others ran, from a friend who had saved his soul without even trying. Outside, the Montana winter howled. Inside, the fire burned warm. And Caleb Stone closed his eyes and slept peacefully for the first time in 50 years.